Hello, I'm Carolyn, your host, and welcome to Weekly Minis, your bite-sized workshop on the hottest acro topics. You can reference all of our previous weekly minis and more amazing content on the Acro Dance Resource Center. If you have any questions, drop them in the comments and we'll do our best to answer those for you in follow-up. And if you know another teacher who should hear about today's topic, be a friend and tag them right now and let them know we're here. Today, we're thrilled to bring you Dr. Leisha Strachan with a bite-sized tutorial you won't want to miss, focusing on overcoming blocks and facing fears. Leisha is a professor at the University of Manitoba in the Faculty of Kinesiology and Recreation Management, specializing in sports psychology and youth development. Leisha is a former Canadian baton twirling champion and represented Canada at 7 World Championships, garnering 2 World Bronze medals. Leisha is a co-founder of Aerial Fusion Baton in Winnipeg, Manitoba. She's a Canadian Baton Twirling Federation coach and World Baton Twirling Federation master judge. She has had the opportunity to coach provincial and national team members and has also choreographed for different athletes across Canada, US, and the United Kingdom. Outside of baton, Leisha is a part of acrobatic arts, and she today is going to bring forward an important conversation that comes by demand by teachers just like you who watch their students face challenges but aren't sure how to help. Leisha put this all into the current world context and gives you some solid evidence-based info and resources so you can work together with your students to overcome what's holding them back. We are thrilled to have her. Welcome, Leisha.
So much, Carolyn. I'm so excited to be here, and I will share my screen and get going. I know this is a hot topic, not just for acrobatic arts teachers, but really for anyone who coaches around the world right now, anything dealing with mental health and how we can support and help and learn is really important. So I hope that there's a few things that you can take from this little mini for today. So when we talk about facing fears, it's so complex and there's so many things to think about and to consider. So some of the questions that I'm sure you're coming across as a teacher or someone who's dealing with young people is, where is the fear or the block coming from? Which again, sometimes can be very complex. It might be something that has nothing to do with the skill that they're trying to do. There's so many things happening in the lives of young people right now. So there could be something else that's going on. Is it simply going back to progressions and helping them gain confidence? We know that confidence has a lot to do with helping minimize fear. Is it due to comparison with others? Is it anxiety? Was it there and now it's not? Did someone have skill and then now it's gone? And how do we help with that? Or is it recovering from an injury? And I know myself, I just a few years ago had to come back from an injury. I tore my Achilles and I really learned firsthand, I think, first time really in my life. I was really fortunate to not have any really major injuries when I was an athlete, but how you overcome that fear in terms of being able to actually do that skill again. So I do want to spend some time, mostly in this little mini session, talking about self-compassion and the importance of self-compassion. So what does it mean to be self-compassionate? So if we look at the definition of self-compassion, it involves being touched by and open to one's own suffering, not avoiding or disconnecting from it, generating the desire to alleviate one's suffering and to heal oneself with kindness. And in the sport literature, there's 3 parts of self-compassion: self-kindness, mindfulness, and common humanity. And I just want to talk a little bit about each of those and also then give some tips on how we can be more self-compassionate. And actually, this will help, I think, when we think about alleviating fears. What are some proactive things that can be done? So the first thing is kindness. Sounds very simple, but so many times we are very self-critical, and that being self-critical can really free someone from actually doing the skills that they want to be able to be doing. So it's an understanding towards yourself rather than berating ourselves with self-criticism. So it's important to think about for ourselves, as well as, I know we are hard on ourselves as well, but, thinking about asking our athletes or the people that we work with, how do they handle criticism right now, or watching and observing how they handle criticism, and to be able to give them that feedback. That's really important, even when you're taking in criticism, to be kind to yourself. The next thing is mindfulness, which is this balanced approach that negative feelings and thoughts are not suppressed or exaggerated, but rather they're observed and acknowledged. So again, thinking about how we acknowledge your thoughts right now is kind of a buzzword, mindfulness, that there's full courses that you can take about mindfulness and lots of apps that are out there to help people be more mindful. But really, it just comes back down to really understanding a little bit more about how you acknowledge your negative thoughts, that they're there, that they're going to come. I think it's impossible and not realistic to think that none of us are ever going to be thinking negatively about ourselves at some point. So it's really thinking about how we acknowledge them and then how we move forward from after acknowledging them. And the last thing is this idea about common humanity, this recognition that suffering and feelings of inadequacy are part of the shared human experiences, that we are not alone. Through the whole pandemic, that's something that came out a lot, this idea that we're all in this together, right? And this idea of a common humanity. So I think if you haven't had a chance to reflect on how the pandemic has allowed us to all experience this common humanity, it's such a great conversation to have with students. We've all just gone through it. We're still going through it in many parts of the nation and around the world. So, how has this allowed us to experience it, and then how does it make us feel when we've all experienced something together? And thinking then about that common humanity when it comes down to something like a skill and being fearful of doing something. I think it's important for athletes to know they're not alone in that either you can share a story of yourself and how maybe you have had to come over something in terms of learning a skill, or saying, a lot of times I'll be like, oh yeah, going upside down is uncomfortable for everyone. And, when I was, learning to do a forward roll or a back roll, I felt the exact same thing, having them understand that there's that common humanity, and that we all have experienced something is also really important to sort of give them that freedom to be able to have some self-acceptance and some courage moving forward. So I'm just going to hit you a little bit with some evidence-based stuff here. How does self-compassion help? So there's so much research within sport and self-compassion. So I really encourage you to look into that literature, especially within the last 5 to 7 years. And here's just some quick points. So individuals who actually practice self-compassion generally demonstrate greater psychological health than those with lower levels of self-compassion. And sorry, just as a caveat to that as well, less anxiety and, less perfectionism. And we know that we tend to attract within dance, I know within my own sport, baton, a lot of athletes who are perfectionistic and sort of have that personality. So I think teaching them about that and helping them understand that if you are more self-compassionate, that is actually better for you. Self-compassion can lead to improvements as well in motivation. And particularly in some studies, when they look at female athletes in particular, that being self-compassionate can assist them with being less self-critical and to manage self-criticism, rumination, and concerns over mistakes. And then it's important to think about what happens when we do hold on to those mistakes. That's when the fear, the doubt, the blocks, that's when all that happens. So being able to practice self-compassion will help with that. Oops, sorry, wrong way. And then generally those who are more self-compassionate actually perform better. So as simple as it might seem to think of being self-kind, being mindful, and thinking we have a common humanity, they're really difficult things to actually practice. So how do we be more self-compassionate? I'm taking this from a study from 2015 that I think gives some great tips. First of all, is thinking about how would you treat a teammate? What do you do when you see a teammate struggling in particular practice or competition? I find that we have lovely students who tend to be extremely compassionate to other people more than they are to themselves. So I think it's important if they're having, fear, or they're having a hard time with courage and they're being really hard on themselves, thinking about what would you tell a friend of yours in this class if they were feeling what you're feeling right now, and have them use that same language for themselves. The next one is sort of practicing a self-compassion break, right? So mindfulness, so being mindful and acknowledging those negative feelings that you're feeling. thinking then about the common humanity that we're all experiencing this, especially if everyone's learning the skill at the same time, and that everyone's experiencing it. And we know that some people might get it faster than others, and that's okay, right? You're on your own journey and experiencing that, and then saying something kind to themselves and then moving forward from that. There's one that these authors talk about, a bead for your thoughts, that they, with their own athletes, have, like, those bead bracelets, and they have, like, every time there's either a self-compassionate thought or a kind thought that comes, they ask them about it, and they put that in their beads, so that by the end of the year they have sort of this bracelet that's full of beads that reminds them of being self-kind. And I think that's kind of a cool thing, especially for kids, to kind of make it more real. And the last thing to remind people is that being self-compassionate doesn't mean that you're self-coddling. I hear that a lot with athletes, that, like, if I give myself a break, I'm not being tough enough on myself. And I think there was a quote in the paper that they say, would you withhold water from yourself during a 4-hour practice to be tough on yourself? No, you wouldn't, because we know the importance of hydration and the importance of taking that mental break. So negativity in the form of self-criticism can have damaging impacts on performance. So it's important to be introspective and not to be hard on yourself. And there's a difference. You can be introspective and, think about what those negative thoughts might be. But then again, going through that self-compassion break, being mindful, taking those negative thoughts, thinking about the common humanity, and then being kind. Also, just a couple additional tips for overcoming fears and some of those blocks that athletes might experience. Using imagery helps a lot. It's in order to face your fears. So there are imagery scripts out there dealing with how to actually deal with fear and overcome fear, as well as how to build confidence, and even some towards goal achievement. If there's a specific goal that they're thinking about, that using a little bit of imagery work to think about, okay, where am I now? How do I see myself performing this skill now? And then where do I want to be? And how do I see that skill being performed there? And then using some breath in order to help with that as well. And just a couple other tips as an instructor or coach. What do you value? And is that reflected in the things that you reward? So if you reward courage and effort, and that's important to you in terms of your philosophy in your studio or whatever you're working, reward that. It might help athletes to relax and not focus so much on the result, and that being the only way that they can get praise. So I'm just going to give a very quick story. When I was doing my doctoral work, I was working in a gymnastics, doing some of my study, I guess, in a gymnastics gym. And they were, I think, really, really good at thinking about how to bring a lot of things of youth development and building positive skills with kids into their gymnastics environment. And I remember being there doing some observation, and there was an athlete who was working on a skill over the pit on the uneven bars. And she was pretty small. I want to say she was probably 10 or 11. And she was working to jump from the low beam to the high beam. And I could tell she was terrified to do this skill. And she had a coach there for a little bit that would spot her through. But it was clear, even when the coach was there spotting her, that she could do the skill. She just kind of had to figure out how to get through that block and do it on her own. And they really just let her stay in the pit for a little while. And I saw her chalk up and then, go up on the bar and stay there for a little bit and then come down and then be like, take a break. And then she'd go and chalk up again and go up. She must have done that like 7 or 8 times. And I don't think she thought anyone was watching her, but there was a coach who was observing her sort of from afar and working with another group. And she finally tried it, and she didn't accomplish it. She definitely fell in the pit. She was a little bit far from getting to the bars. But as soon as she came out of the pit, one of the coaches from the other side said like, that was awesome. And I'm giving you a heart for courage. At the time, they had hearts that they were giving kids when they got a skill or do something. They put it up on this board sort of that went around the whole gym. And this, like, she was like, oh, like, wow, that's great. And did that not motivate that child to try that skill like 50 other times. Like she was up on that on that bill, trying it and trying it and trying it. I can't even remember whether she got it in that practice session, but just being rewarded to have that courage, because we know how hard it is for many kids to just summon up the courage to do a skill. So whether or not they accomplish it, honoring that and rejoicing in the fact that they actually had the courage to do that, it can be really motivating. And finally, this idea of reflection, that's really important to do reflection. It's the key for like really honestly identify feelings, and also thinking about how to track progress and changes. And those help with confidence. So whether it's a book that they're writing in, or whether it's something they just do with a teammate at the end of a practice session, and it's something they do verbally with someone, I think that's just really important. Reflection is such a big part for self-learning and for helping them just to be better humans. And it's a life skill, really, to learn how to reflect, and something that they're going to be using as they move forward in life. So just a quick last two things is rejecting this myth that something like practicing these skills is an overnight solution. It is not. We know that with anything, particularly with physical skills, we know you need to practice. And these are things that they also need to practice. They need to actually practice being self-compassionate, and they need us as coaches and instructors to help them remind that of them. So that little cycle of self-compassion, or that self-compassion break, is a really great little strategy. And we also have to remember that every child is different. They all have their own recipe for success and the things that they do. And we're here to really just give them different tools to put in their toolbox. And this is another tool in terms of learning about self-compassion that they can put in their toolbox so that they have something to use when they need it. So thank you so much for Acrobatic Arts for having me do this session. There's my email if anyone has any questions or any particular things that I can help with. And I will throw it back to Carolyn. Thank you so much.
Wow, Leisha, that was incredible. Thank you so much for those incredible insights and ideas, resources for our teachers to continue to come back to. Teachers, as you know, this information is for you to revisit and use as you need it moving forward with your students. You can find it on our YouTube. You'll also be able to find it with many, many more skill breakdowns, progressions, ideas, tips, and resources just like this on the AcroDance Resource Center. If you haven't already checked out the AcroDance Resource Center, this is not only the syllabus in the palm of your hand, but it is your number one resource, not only for information like this through our weekly minis and teacher resources and videos, but it's chock-a-block full of features like the share levels that work in tandem with the My Acro app. This is where you can literally share syllabus levels with your students from your app to theirs so that they can safely practice at home, as well as tools like our Assist Student, which allows you to superimpose real-time video of your students up against our dancer demos that appear in the app to give corrections or show dancers where improvements and adjustments can be made. So we're not just talking in the app about the physical, but we're also talking about the mental and putting it all together for you so you have tons of resources. The possibilities are endless. You should know that right now we are running our back to class sale where you can receive an additional 10% off the AcroDance Resource Center. You can get, well, you already get an incredible savings if you're a certified teacher. This gives you even more. Don't miss out. We are over 60% sold right now. I will put the sale code in the comments along with the link so you can take action on this now. Thank you again, Leisha. Thank you again, teachers. See you again next time. Bye.